I'm Ashton Addison from EventChain for Investment Pitch Media and the Crypto Coin Show. And today on Blockchain Interviews, we have Gregory Landua, CEO and co-founder of Regen Network. Gregory, welcome to the show, and thanks for taking the time to be here.
Yeah, Ashton, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about Regen Network, the climate ecosystem, and merging that in with blockchain is something that is fascinating and I think needs to be done right now in this time. And your team is working on some really interesting stuff. So I would love for you to kick it off with just a high-level overview and the focus of Regen Network, and then we can dive into the details.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, at Regen Network, we're a bit bold. We like to say, our mission is nothing short of planetary regeneration. And we're also pretty practical. So we've worked very hard to understand the unique challenges of climate finance and carbon markets and start to build the tools to unlock the massive potential of climate finance, both to solve the climate challenge, right? All this excess atmospheric carbon needs to go somewhere. But also to unlock the potential of this new financial revolution that's going to take place at the intersection of digital finance and climate finance. And in order to do so, we've built a public proof of stake blockchain that's focused on creating transparency, accountability, and financial innovation in carbon markets and climate finance more broadly.
Definitely, and great intro, Gregory. And there are so many issues that you can tackle from different directions in climate finance. This is a global problem, and there's a lot of people working on it. And I'm curious, the approach that you took when you started Regen Network, what were some of the problems that you were most specifically worried about and that you narrowed in on, and that you were most interested in introducing blockchain and distributed ledgers to solve these problems?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of big issues. Climate finance generally, carbon markets specifically, are really, we're talking about a public goods accounting issue. We're talking about either internalizing costs that have been previously externalized, like emissions of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, or funding public goods directly, where you can't necessarily enclose and privatize the good because everybody's going to benefit from a clean, healthy planet. And yet we all depend on it at the same time. It's a fundamental part of operating a business. And it turns out that blockchains are uniquely well suited. And as we all know, people talk a lot about funding public goods in the blockchain space. Why is that? What are the attributes of blockchain that make it well situated to solving this problem? Well, the first is a public ledger. So having transparency, in our case, it's enormously important to understand the structure of a claim around a carbon credit. Currently, carbon markets are very opaque, and it's extraordinarily expensive to audit a carbon claim. You essentially have to have a staff of PhD professionals who can dig in to a lot of paperwork, PDFs, track data down in order to audit a claim. So, our value proposition is to work to lower the marginal cost of auditing a claim to as close to zero as possible, so that any stakeholder in the system can understand if what's taking place is fair, if the impact that's being claimed really is the impact that's happening somewhere on Earth. So in our case, I think I sort of I think I alluded to this earlier, but I wasn't very specific. We're very focused on natural climate solutions. We're very focused on soil health, forest biodiversity, conservation, water quality, the ecological state, how healthy our planet is, and how effectively natural ecosystems are sequestering carbon out of the atmosphere. And that's because those are the places that have the most ability to stack what we would refer to as co-benefits, or multiple public benefits, like reducing flood risk goes hand in hand with sequestering more carbon into your soil. So those are two different benefits that can accrue from a land steward, a farmer in this case, changing their practices and stewarding their land better. But how do you account for that? And how do you create an asset class that allows us to realign the incentives of the multiple stakeholders that benefit from that public good outcome?
Definitely. And those are great initiatives, Gregory. And you're right about the transparency. That's super important, especially because it seems often it's cheaper for corporations to cut corners and pay a fine than to go, the long and hard way and the right way to do it. And I think that's why transparency is going to be so key moving forward.
That's right. It's going to be a transformation. I mean, I think we are entering into an era of that competition will be dictated by how effectively you can provide goods and services as well as care for the public good. And that's going to be the competitive dynamic of the 21st century. And in fact, it is already started to be that with ESG investing and the huge rise in CSR, corporate social responsibility. What we're seeing is, I'll actually do a little loop here. What we're seeing is the growth of a multi-trillion-dollar industry. In climate finance alone, the World Economic Forum, the UN, World Bank have all estimated that our specific little niche, which is natural climate solutions, which is carbon being sequestered into forests, oceans, wetlands, farmlands, is going to be upwards of $2 trillion per annum by 2050. So that's the same size as the oil and gas industry, right? So
Wow.
this is a big emergent industry, and the infrastructure that's required for that is accountability and transparency about claims, right? How do you know that soil carbon is deeper and healthier this year than it was last, right? How do you know that forest is intact or is being reforested or regenerated? This all comes down to having a data integrity layer, but also the ability to assess data quality and assemble all of that into claims, credits, and new financial instruments. And that's really where Regen Network is innovating and providing services.
Amazing, Gregory. And I know your team is well on your way to providing these solutions. And you're so early in this market, as you mentioned, it's going to be as big as oil and gas. And right now it is just nowhere near that, but it is going to be when people start waking up. And I know that your team's been working hard. You recently closed a $10.5 million fundraising sale. So congratulations on that. That's a huge step forward.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really fantastic to be supported by the community. We have quite a healthy distribution in our initial private round. We're about to shift into a public distribution of these governance tokens as well, coming soon. So stay tuned. And it's just, it was a long ride. I mean, we've been at this since 2017, really, and we decided not to do an ICO in 2017, mainly because we felt like we needed to have a public blockchain on one hand, but we also needed to do so in a way that was mitigating regulatory uncertainty, because we need to be able to stretch between. We need to create a peer-to-peer network that allows for data integrity, transparency, and financial inclusion in this new asset class that includes institutions, governments, and smallholder farmers, indigenous people. I mean, really everyone is a stakeholder in this. So we took it pretty slow, and it's it's a testament to what we've built that we managed to raise from a large community a healthy amount over the time, while deploying real, products and services along the way. So it's been quite a ride.
Definitely quite the ride. And yeah, all of those parties are super important. And I think large corporations as well have a big role to play. And I know that your team recently had a credit sale that involved Microsoft. I would love for you to elaborate on that and how they're working with this and how you're working with that.
Yeah, so we were very excited to sell all of our pilot carbon credits that had been innovated over the last couple of years to Microsoft. Microsoft made a pretty amazing commitment to go carbon negative which a lot of companies are starting to do, and Microsoft is one of the leaders of this movement. Just a brief note, people may say, why are these big companies wanting to be carbon negative and buying credits? Well, it's because they've recently realized that carbon emissions are a real risk, and therefore they're including it as a liability on their balance sheet. And therefore, these big corporates basically have a fiduciary responsibility to mitigate that liability, and therefore they're purchasing carbon credits. So in Microsoft's case, they alone, along with a couple of the other leaders, if they were to mitigate all of their carbon sequestration through carbon removal, and I'll get into the different types of carbon credit classes in a moment, but they have a very specific strategy, which involves actually pulling carbon out of the atmosphere, not just having more energy efficiency in some place around the planet, but actually removing carbon out of the atmosphere is what they're purchasing. And there are not enough credits in the marketplace to serve them. And so they did a request for proposals. We won that bid, essentially. We were one of the winning teams, and they purchased all of the carbon credits that we had been able to issue up through this year. And we're very excited to actually see that continue and to see the interest from other corporates. So I alluded to sort of walking viewers through a quick 101 of different types of carbon credits. So you could sort of think of this in three main ways. There's avoided emissions, which are things like avoided deforestation. That's accounted for by saying how much would be emitted if we chop this forest and cut it down. And that's actually what you account for, which is kind of crazy. Or avoided emissions like you got your coal power plant more efficient. And so the delta, the change between what you were polluting and what you're polluting now is what's accounted for in the carbon credit. So that's one type. Another type is actual carbon removal or carbon drawdown, where you're able to account for carbon being sequestered and stored into, for instance, a living system like soil, and you're able to account for the permanence of that, how long it's going to be stored. And the final way is carbon removal into long-term systems where they're pumping liquid carbon back down into the Earth's crust and these sorts of things. And so there's sort of three different types of carbon markets. We're focused on the natural solutions that give, as I was noting earlier, the most co-benefits.
That's amazing, Gregory. And to have such great partners early on and to have all of these different ways to work together with all these different parties, it seems like the options are endless, and you're really going to have to narrow your focus down and have your team, working hard on getting out the functionality that you need to get out in the right order. Could you allude to where your platform is at right now and sort of what are the next steps throughout the summer of 2021 that you're planning on working in terms of the product?
Yeah, so we just launched our mainnet. So we have a live public network, which I believe is the world's first public blockchain dedicated to ecological data, claims, and assets. So we have a global ecological ledger now that's live. And over the course of the next 6 months or so, we're going to be progressively upgrading that layer one solution for ecological accounting to bring online sort of what we would consider the minimum viable functionality, which includes the credit functionality, some very advanced data on and off chain data functionality, governance so that people can curate credit classes, so that stakeholders like corporations can govern credit classes, as well as associations of monitors and verifiers. So you have this sort of nested governance to ensure quality of the assets themselves. So all of that is going to be coming online over the next 2 months or so. And then proceeding for there, our focus is really on empowering the community. So we have our Carbon Plus credit class that we developed to using all open source technology and open source approaches to show people what's possible, to be able to bring a new credit class to market and serve sort of a high-end buyer like Microsoft with their corporate goals. And really what we're wanting to do is invite a huge amount of creative participation so that people can use this public network to launch their own ecological applications, new credit classes, and really invigorate innovation in the space, which has been quite constricted.
Oh, wow, I'm looking forward to seeing that play out. And especially, I think the community is very important to have them involved early on and for them to help develop that ecosystem as well and to be able to have them participate. And I know you have the RND token. I'm guessing that has a governance aspect to it in the ecosystem. If you could just elaborate on the Regen token, how it's involved throughout the product and the ecosystem, and does it create a sustainable ecosystem for the participants? That would be great.
Yeah, so the Regen token is the public proof of stake governance token for the network. And so that allows a holder to govern the blockchain itself. So participate in governance. What are the modules that we're going to have on chain? What's the functionality? What's the direction that we're moving as a community? It also allows people to, as I was noting, there's nested curatorial or governance to be able to also participate in governance of credit classes and engage in the type of curation and quality assurance that's really going to make Regen Network, I think, unique as a public approach to generating ecological assets. And Regen tokens give holders access to block rewards. So the annual inflation of the token supply accrues to token holders who are staking their token and have their tokens at stake in order to secure the network. It also accrues fees. And each new credit class, each new credit that's issued is a token that is secured on the layer one, on the blockchain. So every time a new credit class is issued, exchanged, retired, or these new classes of ecosystem service currencies and supply chain transparency, which are all applications that are currently starting to innovate and build on this public blockchain, the more activity there is, the more value accrues to the token holders. And the more the token holders engage with governing the system in a way that's complementary to attract activity and to ensure quality. So there's really a virtuous cycle between application developers, stakeholders, and token holders to really build this powerful new approach to ecological accounting.
Definitely, that is a powerful cycle, Gregory, and I'm looking forward to seeing that grow because this is just an initiative that is so important to the whole world right now. And we are running short on time, but for those viewers that are more passionate about the climate and they want to learn more or they want to get involved in the product and the ecosystem, what's the best way for them to get involved?
Well, there's definitely a few different ways. The biggest way right now is probably to come drop in our Discord channel. There's a lot, you'll get to see quite an active community. There's a lot of chatter, people doing different things. So you're more than welcome to hop in over there. I'm sure we can throw a link. And if you're a land steward or you're interested in purchasing credits, there's places to sign up on the website. And if you're interested in participating in the public sale at some point in the future, you can sign up on the website. There's a spot there to just sign up, and we'll let you know when when we're out on exchanges and when it's able to sort of jump in and help co-create this regenerative future that we're working towards.
Definitely, and I will leave those community links in the description box below as well for the viewers. Thank you so much for taking the time, Gregory, to talk about Regen Network and this very important initiative right now. All the best with the whole product and the platform moving forward, and let's follow up in the near future.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ashton. This has been fantastic.